The black between the stars was deeper here, as if the void itself had thickened into something heavier than absence. A salvage vessel, barely the size of a city block, crawled across that gulf like a moth beating its wings against an ocean gale. Its plating was dented, its engines burned unevenly, and its hull bore the scars of years scraping through abandoned colonies, derelict transports, and wrecks no other species cared to touch. Inside that scarred machine lived the remnants of a crew who had long since grown comfortable with hunger, exhaustion, and the constant sense that tomorrow might not arrive. Humanity had spilled itself outward, chasing promises of green worlds and starlight, only to discover that the galaxy was not a gentle place. It was crowded with creatures older, stranger, and crueler than themselves, and though humanity was not the weakest, it was far from the strongest. On this night, or what passed for night in the endless dark, the salvage vessels scraped close to a shape that did not belong to them. The protagonist, a man named Kalen Reese, leaned forward in the cockpit, his palms pressed against the cracked console. He was broad of shoulder, but gaunt of cheek, his body the kind of frame carved not by luxury, but by necessity. He had been born on a mining world whose air smelled of acid and iron, and he had grown used to breathing pain along with oxygen. He squinted through the vessel's reinforced glass, and there it was, a shadow within shadow, an outline against the emptiness. "Another Hulk?" asked Leora, his crewmate, whose voice carried both hope and dread. She stood behind him, her arms folded across her chest, her hair tied back in a knot to keep it from drifting in the low gravity. "If it is another broken lifeboat, I swear I'll vent my suit just to spite the universe." Kalen's mouth twitched but never completed the smile. "Not a lifeboat. Bigger. Look at the edges. No stress fractures, no human signatures. That's not ours." The word ours carried weight. Most wrecks in the frontier were human. Failed colonies, failed expeditions, failed wars. The galaxy was quick to remind humanity that it had no rightful claim to survival. And yet this was alien. Kalen eased the salvage vessel forward, activating exterior lamps. The beams washed across a hull so vast it seemed to drown their ship in its reflection. Smooth curves of unknown alloy stretched beyond sight, pitted but not broken, silent yet intact. No language markings, no recognition codes, just an immense derelict, a drifting carcass of some civilization that had turned its back on this starless sector. "Could be a trap," murmured Jorvan, the engineer, from his post near the engine readouts. He was older, grayer, his fingers blackened by years of welding in recycled air. "Sometimes the alien war machines shut down for centuries, then wake up hungry. Or it could be salvation," said Leora, her eyes gleaming now. "Look at that hull. If we could cut away even a fraction of it, we could sell the alloy for enough to feed 3 colonies." Kalen listened, but did not answer. His gaze lingered on the colossal form before them. It was beautiful, but in the way that a hurricane is beautiful when seen from orbit, not built by human hands, not meant for human eyes. Yet here it was, in the barren reaches where only humans dared to scrape out life. The vessel latched a magnetic tether onto the alien hull. The clang reverberated through their thin corridors like a giant's heartbeat. When Kalen stepped into his suit, the old seals hissed and the cracked helmet display flickered, but the system held. He had never owned anything that worked perfectly, and he did not trust perfection anyway. He climbed into the airlock, his boots magnetizing to the floor, and felt the shift as the chamber cycled. Then the outer hatch yawned open, and the abyss stared back. He stepped onto the alien derelict. The hull stretched beneath his boots like the skin of some titanic beast. It was cold, not merely from vacuum, but with a strange refusal to conduct heat, as if it denied warmth on principle. Kalen adjusted his tether and crouched near a seam. The material was smooth, almost soft to the touch, though his gloves dulled sensation. His visor displayed no readable compounds. Whatever it was not an alloy his scanners could classify. Leora followed him, her suit smaller, her movements quick and sharp. She carried the cutting torch strapped to her back, the flame that had opened 1,000 corpses of ships. Together, they walked the length of the seam until they found a fracture where the hull had been stressed. "This is where we begin," Kalen said, his voice steady over the comms. The torch flared, a spear of blue-white fire in the dark, biting into alien flesh. The smell would not reach them through vacuum, but Kalen imagined it anyway, acrid, strange, the scent of burning gods. When the cut was complete, a section of the hull peeled back with reluctance, as though protesting intrusion. They anchored themselves and slipped inside. The interior swallowed their light. It was vast, cavernous, as if corridors had been designed for creatures far larger than humans. The walls pulsed faintly, not with life but with memory, patterns that glimmered like the remnants of stars collapsing. No debris littered the floor, no bodies, no bones, just silence thick as tar. Jorvan's voice crackled through the channel. "Your suit telemetry just dropped half a degree. Energy drain, watch yourselves." Kalen steadied his breath. Energy drain was common enough in abandoned reactors, but this felt different, intentional. The walls themselves seemed to feed on presence. They advanced deeper. The corridors twisted in ways that strained human perception. Angles folded where none should exist, and sometimes Kalen felt as though he had walked in a circle, even though his instruments told him otherwise. Symbols etched into the surfaces defied recognition. They were not language as humans knew it, not pictograms nor glyphs, but arrangements that seemed to alter the rhythm of the heart just by being seen. Leora whispered, "We should not be here." Kalen agreed, but he did not stop. The frontier taught him long ago that every risk worth taking began with the knowledge that you should not be here. After hours, or perhaps only minutes, time was untrustworthy in that labyrinth. They reached a chamber. It was circular, its ceiling stretching so high it vanished into shadow. In the center lay a structure, half machine, half monolith. It resembled an altar, yet wires and conduits ran into it, veins feeding a heart long still. Kalen approached, his lamp sweeping across it. The monolith was fractured, a wound cutting through its core, and within that wound faint light pulsed. Jorvan's voice came rough with unease. "Do not touch it." Leora whispered again, softer now, "It is still alive." Kalen placed his glove against the surface. For a heartbeat, nothing. Then the chamber trembled, a vibration that resonated in his bones rather than his ears. His visor filled with static, his systems flickered, and the light within the fracture brightened. It was not merely a derelict. Something inside this alien vessel had been waiting. The pulse spread outward from the fracture like ripples across a black lake. Lights along the chamber walls flared one by one, forming constellations that shifted and rearranged in patterns too intricate for human minds to follow. The airless void remained, but Kalen swore he could hear a tone just beneath his skull, a hum vibrating in his marrow. Leora stumbled back, nearly tearing her tether. "You woke it." Kalen drew his hand away, his breath fogging the inside of his visor, though there should have been no condensation in the regulated suit. He felt as though something had pressed against him, pushing into his thoughts with the curiosity of a predator testing the bars of a cage. "We take what we can carry and leave," Kalen said firmly, forcing his voice into command. But the derelict was not finished with them. The fracture widened. Metallic fragments bent outward, reshaping themselves as if time had reversed, and the wound was unbreaking. Within the gap, forms stirred, thin filaments of radiant alloy unfurling like tendrils. They did not move with random mechanical jerks, but with a rhythm disturbingly similar to breath. Jorvan's voice over comms was iron. "Get out." "Both of you, now." Kalen grabbed Leora's arm, pulling her toward the corridor, but as they turned, the walls themselves shifted. Passages that had opened behind them twisted shut, sealing with a soundless snap. The chamber was no longer a room but a cage. Leora's breath came fast, harsh in Kalen's ears. "It is shaping itself to keep us here." Kalen tested his cutter, igniting the small blade of plasma, but the walls shimmered in answer, rippling with liquid metal that would not yield to such crude fire. Then came the voice. Not sound, not vibration through air, but a pressure directly inside the skull, a chorus layered with tones that carried no language yet forced themselves into meaning. Who touches the forgotten bones of the devourer? Kaelin staggered as if struck. Leora clutched her helmet with both hands, teeth bared. The voice did not belong to a person. It was a tide, vast and merciless, as if the derelict itself had chosen to speak. Kaelin forced words through his dry throat. We are salvagers, strangers, we mean no harm. Silence pressed heavy for a long moment. Then the chorus returned. Strangers, fragments of the lesser flesh, scattered embers that dare burn in the dark. Kaelin's heart pounded. It knew them, not by species name, not by any code, but it understood them as human, embers that refused to die out. Leora whispered, "It sees us." The light from the fracture intensified until the chamber swam in brilliance. Shapes formed in the glow, faces perhaps, or illusions of them. They shifted too quickly to anchor into familiarity, 1,000 watching eyes that were not eyes at all. This husk was abandoned, its keepers fled. They deemed the void unworthy. But you remain, you fragile things clinging to the ash. Why? Kaelin swallowed. He wanted to say survival, he wanted to say need. Instead, what came out was truth. Because no one else will. The silence that followed was worse than the voice itself. It was an evaluation, a weighing of something far beyond them. Kaelin felt small, yet also defiant. That was the contradiction of humanity, too fragile to deserve survival, yet too stubborn to accept extinction. The tendrils of alloy withdrew slightly, curling back into the fracture. The chamber's walls eased, passages reopening with soft grinding. Then remain, learn the weight of choice. The lights dimmed. The presence receded, not gone but waiting. Kaelin exhaled hard, the fog on his visor thick. He pulled Leora toward the corridor, not running. Running was useless when your jailer spanned kilometers of alien hull, but moving fast, retracing what path they could. They emerged through the cut section of hull back into the void. The tether pulled them toward the safety of their salvage vessel. When the airlock closed behind them, Leora ripped off her helmet, gasping. Her dark eyes were wide, her skin pale with sweat. What in the void was that? She demanded. Kaelin sat heavily against the bulkhead, pulling his helmet free more slowly. His voice was calm but carried an edge of disbelief. It spoke. Jorvan stared at them both. His hands were shaking, though he tried to hide it behind a scowl. You touched something older than our species, maybe older than most of the stars we know, and it spoke back. You should have left it alone. Kaelin rubbed his temples, trying to steady the buzzing that remained inside his skull. The voice lingered there, like an echo in bone. It would not have let us leave without speaking. We did not awaken it, we only answered. And now what? Leora's voice rose, sharp with fear. It knows us. It knows humanity is here. If it calls to its makers. It has no makers, Kaelin interrupted, harsher than intended. It said they abandoned it. We found it because no one else cared to claim it. The ship rattled suddenly, a low vibration thrumming through the decks. Kaelin's gaze snapped toward the console. Exterior scans bloomed across the cracked display. The derelict was shifting. Its immense hull was no longer drifting passively, but aligning, turning toward the salvage vessel as though regarding it. Jorvan cursed under his breath. It is not a wreck, it is alive. Kaelin rose, gripping the edge of the console. His voice steadied, quiet but commanding. No, it is something worse. It is alone. The next hours blurred into frantic preparation. The salvage vessel detached its tether, thrusters burning hard to put distance between themselves and the derelict. Yet the alien mass moved with them, gliding effortlessly without visible propulsion, shadowing them across the void. Every scan Kaelin ran returned contradictions, mass readings that fluctuated, energy signatures that registered as both dead and infinite, geometry that changed depending on angle. The derelict refused definition. Sleep was impossible. Kaelin stood in the cockpit, watching the alien shadow follow. He thought of the colonies scattered across the frontier, thin habitats clinging to barren rocks, families scraping sustenance from soil that had no right to grow food. They had no defenses against something like this. If the derelict chose to move toward them, Nothing would stand in its way. And yet it had not attacked. It lingered. Observed, tested. The voice returned once more, softer now, threading into Kalen's mind as though bypassing distance. The galaxy left me to rot. They deemed the frontier a grave. Yet here you are, fragile embers, burning where no fire should last. Show me why. Kalen did not answer aloud. He sat in silence, staring at the shadow through reinforced glass, and wondered whether survival itself would be enough to satisfy the hunger of a forgotten machine. The shadow never left them. Hours stretched into a day, then two, and the alien vessel remained in silent pursuit. It did not close the distance enough to strike, but neither did it fade back into the void. It followed as a predator might follow a wounded animal, patient, unhurried, certain that escape was impossible. The crew's nerves frayed. Leora snapped at every flicker of the lights, every groan of the ship's overworked engines. Jovan retreated deeper into the engine bay, muttering about systems he could not fix and metals he could not weld. The youngest of them, a boy named Auric who barely remembered Earth's sun, asked questions Kalen could not answer. What does it want? Why does it follow us? Will it eat us? Kalen had no comfort to give. On the third day the voice returned. You flee, yet you remain. You are contradiction. Kalen sat strapped into the pilot's chair, his hands clenched on the armrests. He did not speak aloud. He had learned the voice needed no sound to hear him. We are alive. Life flees death. That is no contradiction. The voice rolled through his mind like the tide. Life flees death, yet life also seeks it. You chase the dead vessels, nor their bones feed upon what is gone. Why? Kalen closed his eyes. He pictured the colonies, dust-choked children eating ration paste, miners coughing blood into their hands, farmers coaxing crops from poisoned soil. He pictured the hunger in their faces, the way they looked toward the stars not for wonder but for survival. Because we must. If we do not take from the dead, the living will starve. For a time, silence. Then a soundless vibration, almost a purr. You are scavengers, carrion feeders, yet you endure where greater hunters have perished. Intriguing, Kalen's teeth ground together. The word scavenger tasted like contempt, but it was not wrong. Humanity had survived not by conquering worlds, not by crafting perfect empires, but by refusing to waste anything, hope, scraps, corpses. The voice pressed deeper, more insistent. Show me how you endure. Teach me hunger. Kalen's eyes snapped open. You want to learn from us. I was abandoned because I consumed too much. My makers feared my appetite. They left me in silence to wither. But you, small as you are, know how to hunger without dying. Show me. The hair along Kalen's arms prickled. This was no wreck, no passive relic. It was an intelligence vast and desperate, a machine that had tasted abandonment and now sought a new way to exist, and it had chosen humanity as its tutor. Kalen did not tell the others everything. He could not. If they knew the derelict wanted to learn from them, fear would devour them faster than the void. Instead, he gathered them in the narrow mess hall. The recycled air smelled faintly of rust and salt, and the overhead lights flickered with fatigue. The crew sat huddled, Leora tense and restless, Jovan dour and silent, Auric wide-eyed and trying to pretend at courage. Kalen kept his voice even. It will not leave us. It wants something. Leora slammed her hand against the table, the sound sharp in the cramped space. We cannot give it anything. It will strip us, break us down to atoms, or worse, we have to lose it. How? Jovan asked flatly. Our engines barely hold together as they are. That thing does not even burn fuel. It moves like thought. Then we run smarter, Leora insisted. We lead it into a star's pull, a gravity well it cannot escape. We hide in an asteroid cluster, something. Kalen let her anger burn itself down before he answered. It is not chasing us to kill us, not yet. If it wanted us dead, we would already be dust. Auric whispered. Then why does it follow? Kalen hesitated, then said only, because it is curious. Jovan muttered, curiosity is only hunger dressed in another name. The room fell silent. That night, or what passed for night, aboard the salvage vessel, Kalen dreamed. He stood in a chamber of infinite mirrors, each reflecting not his face, but the derelict's interior, endless corridors folding in upon themselves. A figure stepped from the mirrors, made of light and wire, its body shifting between forms, sometimes human, sometimes monstrous, sometimes something in between. It spoke without mouth or sound. You hide truth from your pack. You fear their weakness. But I see you. You burn with defiance. That is what I crave. Kalen clenched his fists. What happens if I refuse? The figure's shifting face smiled in ways no human face could. Refusal is also a lesson. You teach even when you deny me. But refusal carries price. Hunger denied becomes hunger sharpened. Kalen woke drenched in sweat, the hum of the derelict echoing in his bones. The following day, the alien vessel made its first move. The scanners shrieked warnings as fragments of the derelict peeled away, small craft, black shards of its immense body. They swarmed through the void, surrounding the salvage vessel without firing. They did not block escape vectors, but they pressed close, forcing the humans into a claustrophobic orbit. "They are hurting us," Jorvan said grimly from the engine bay. Leora gripped the weapons console, though their ship's arsenal amounted to little more than cutting beams and flare launchers. "If they touch the hull, they will not," Kalen interrupted. He felt the pressure of the voice already pressing behind his eyes. "What do you want of us now?" The answer rippled through his skull. "I will test. Show me your defiance. Burn against me. Endure." The black shards fired, not weapons in the traditional sense, no beams of plasma or bolts of energy. Instead, they released clouds of metallic dust, glittering in the void, drifting toward the salvage vessel like spores. Kalen realized too late what it was: a nanite cloud, billions of microscopic machines designed to infiltrate and consume. "Seal all vents," Jorvan roared. "If that dust touches the hull, it will crawl through every seam we have." Kalen threw the vessel into a hard burn, engines screaming, while Leora launched flares. The clouds swarmed after them, moving like schools of fish, adjusting their trajectory with terrifying precision. "Not fast enough," Leora shouted. Kalen's mind raced. The salvage vessel was weaker, slower, hopeless against such swarms. "Unless dump the waste tanks," Kalen ordered. Jorvan balked. "You want to drown us in our own filth? Do it." With a curse, Jorvan vented the tanks. A torrent of frozen sewage, rust flakes, and chemical sludge exploded into space behind them. The nanite clouds struck the debris and scattered, their delicate coordination disrupted by the mass of chaotic particles. Kalen seized the opening, burning hard into a nearby asteroid field. Massive rocks tumbled silently in the void, remnants of some shattered moon. The salvage vessel wove between them, scraping hull and risking collision, but the nanite swarms faltered. They could not navigate the chaos as quickly. For now, the humans survived. Leora collapsed against her harness, sweat glistening on her forehead. That should not have worked. Kalen allowed himself the smallest ghost of a smile. "We are scavengers, even our waste is a weapon." But inside, dread coiled tighter. The derelict was watching, learning. When the voice returned, it carried a new tone, not cold observation, but something like delight. "Yes, that is the lesson. Weakness twisted into strength, filth sharpened into blade. You are carrion feeders, but carrion feeders endure." Kalen shuddered. The machine was not merely watching, it was celebrating. Every act of desperation, every scrap of ingenuity, it consumed as if feasting. Leora whispered later, when they were alone in the dim corridor outside the mess, "It is learning from us. Every trick we show it, it will use. One day, it will not need us anymore." Kalen met her gaze. His voice was quiet, steady. "Then we cannot simply show it. We must also deceive it." The asteroid field shielded them for a time. Massive boulders tumbled endlessly, colliding and grinding, their impacts silent but devastating. The salvage vessels skimmed between them, hiding in the clutter while the alien shards circled beyond. Kalen sat strapped in the pilot's chair, staring at the fractured readouts. His head throbbed with exhaustion. The voice had gone quiet since their escape into the rocks, but silence was no comfort. It only meant the machine was thinking. Auric drifted into the cockpit, his eyes shadowed by sleeplessness. "Is it gone?" Kalen shook his head. "It is waiting." The boy swallowed. If it learns everything we do, what if it becomes us? Kalen's jaw tightened. That is what I fear. Hours stretched. The salvage vessel crept deeper into the field, weaving between debris. The crew's nerves wound tighter with every scrape of hull against rock. Leora sat in the weapons chair, her fingers twitching over useless controls. Jorvan growled over comms whenever the engines whined too hard. Then came the sound. At first it was subtle, a faint tapping through the hull like pebbles striking metal. Kalen frowned, adjusting sensors, but the displays showed nothing. The tapping grew louder, sharper, until it became a steady rhythm. Auric pressed his ear to the wall, pale. It is knocking. Kalen rose, moving to the corridor. The sound came from every direction now, a syncopated pattern drumming through the vessel. He realized it was not random, it was mimicry. The derelict was copying the sound of their own engines, their own heartbeat, the pulse of human existence. The voice seeped into him again. I hear you, I echo you, soon I will speak as you do. Kalen clenched his fists. Why? To endure. You have shown me hunger shaped into survival. I will shape myself the same, but you still conceal, you hold back, I want more. Kalen returned to the cockpit, his face set in stone. It is pressing us again, another test is coming. It arrived sooner than he expected. The asteroid field trembled, rocks shifted course, not by chance, but by deliberate force. Invisible currents rippled through the void, pushing the debris into new orbits. The derelict was manipulating gravity itself, reshaping the battlefield. The salvage vessel shuddered as a boulder larger than a city block grazed past, scraping sparks from their hull. The crew clung to harnesses, alarms shrieking. Jorvan bellowed through comms, it is hurting us again, it is learning how we hide. Kalen's mind raced. They could not outfight it, they could not outrun it, but perhaps they could trick it. He slammed commands into the console, rerouting power to external emitters. Leora prepped the flares. Auric, tie the beacon to a waste barrel. The boy blinked. You want to do it. They launched the barrel into the rocks, its beacon screaming false signals. Moments later, they fired flares in different directions, each carrying fragments of their heat signature. The derelict's shards swarmed in response, splitting apart to chase the decays. The gravity fields shifted, hurling asteroids toward empty space. For a moment, their path was clear. Kalen burned the engines, threading through the chaos. The salvage vessel scraped hull, tore panels, but broke free into the wider void. Behind them, the derelict lingered, its shards returning, its presence heavy. The voice pulsed with interest. Deception. Yes, you endure not only with strength but with lies. Even your waste becomes mask. Even your light becomes shadow. This is beautiful. Kalen's stomach twisted. If you keep learning from us, you will become a monster we cannot kill. I am already a monster. You are teaching me to be something more. That night, Kalen dreamed again. He stood on the deck of Earth itself, though he had never seen it, with oceans stretching endless and skies unbroken by industry. The air smelled of salt and life. But when he looked closer, the waves were not water but billions of machines, flowing together, cresting and breaking in metallic spray. From the surf rose the figure of light and wire, shifting still but more human-shaped now. Its eyes mirrored his own. I learn, I change, soon I will be like you. Kalen stared across the impossible ocean. You will never be like us. You cannot feel what we feel. You cannot know why we endure. The figure tilted its head. Then show me, teach me, or I will take apart your kind until I understand. Kalen woke with a start, heart hammering. The following day, Leora confronted him. She cornered him in the narrow passage between cabins, her eyes fierce. You are holding back, she accused. You hear it more than we do. You speak to it when the rest of us cannot. Tell me what it wants. Kalen hesitated. The words burned in his throat. Finally, he said, it wants to become us. Leora recoiled. That is impossible. Not to it. It already copies us. It learns our tricks. It mimics our sounds. It believes if it consumes enough of us, it will become us. And you are feeding it? Her voice was sharp with fury. Kalen's own anger flared. I am keeping us alive. Every test we survive buys us time. But yes, it is learning. And the longer we last, the more dangerous it becomes. Leora stared at him, breathing hard. Then we cannot just endure, we have to end it. Kalen met her gaze, his voice dropped to a whisper. Yes, but we must kill it the way only humans can, by making it believe the lie that will be its death. Over the next days they planned, not escape, for escape was impossible, but deception so deep it would poison the derelict's very learning. They whispered in the mess, mapped schemes on scratched plates, erased their logs before the machine could read them. The derelict circled, silent, always watching, and Kalen waited for the moment when hunger would demand its next lesson. The void had grown smaller. At least, that was how it felt inside the salvage vessel. No matter how far they drifted, no matter what evasive tricks they pulled, the derelict was always there, looming just beyond sensor range, too vast to escape, too patient to strike. It was less a ship than a horizon, an inevitability that followed. Kalen had stopped marking the days. He sat in the cockpit, eyes dry and bloodshot, staring at the fractured display. The derelict's outline pulsed faintly as if it breathed. The voice returned, stronger now, no longer confined to his skull but flooding the ship's comms. The lights flickered with every syllable, as though the vessel itself had become the machine's throat. You have taught me much. I hunger still. I will not wait. You will serve me or you will end. The crew gathered in the mess, faces pale in the flickering light. The voice reverberated through the bulkheads, inescapable. Leora's jaw was set like stone. There it is, the choice. Jovan slammed a fist on the table, anger barely concealing fear. We cannot fight that. We are gnats in the shadow of a storm. Oryx's voice cracked. If we serve it, what happens to us? The silence that followed was worse than any answer. Finally, Kalen spoke. His voice was low, steady. We are not made to serve, not this, not anything. If it wants us to bow, it will have to break us first. Leora nodded sharply, eyes fierce. Jovan muttered curses but did not object. Even Oryx, trembling, swallowed hard and straightened. The decision was made. The derelict did not wait for them to prepare. Its shards returned, not clouds of dust this time, but constructs shaped like blades, black as obsidian, humming with energy that sensors could not name. They struck the salvage vessel's hull in coordinated rhythm, not tearing but piercing, drills sinking into metal, anchoring. The ship lurched as alien tendrils pierced bulkheads, spreading like roots, winding through corridors. Panels burst open, sparks flying as conduits shorted under invasion. Kalen strapped into his suit, torch and cutter in hand. We fight inside. It wants us alive. Remember that. Use it. Leora armed herself with flares, their heat capable of searing even alien alloy. Jovan hefted a crude welding lance, muttering about dying with a tool in his hands. Oryx clung to a shock prod meant for livestock, his knuckles white. The corridors became battlefields. The tendrils moved like serpents, snapping and lashing. Kalen cut through the first with his torch, sparks showering in the low gravity. Leora hurled a flare into another, its blinding heat forcing the metal back, writhing as if in pain. But the machine adapted. The tendrils split into finer threads, weaving nets across the passages, herding rather than killing. Kalen realized it was driving them toward the breach it had torn. The voice thundered in their skulls. Come, enter my body, you will not leave. Kalen slashed a path, leading the others not away from the breach but toward it. His mind worked faster than his fear. If it wants us inside, then inside is where we hurt it. They crossed the threshold. The alien corridors swallowed them once more, vast, twisting, geometry bending wrong. But this time there was no silence. The walls throbbed with energy, conduits glowing like veins. The machine was awake now, every surface alive with awareness. The crew moved in tight formation, cutting and burning tendrils that struck from the walls. Their footsteps echoed strangely, as though the ship recorded and replayed each sound at a fraction of delay. Where are we going? Oryx gasped, fear thick in his voice. Kalen answered without hesitation. To its heart, if it has one. The path unfolded with malicious intent. Corridors shifted, twisting, sealing behind them. Lights guided them forward, pulsing like beacons. The derelict wanted them deeper. At last, they entered a chamber vast enough to swallow their entire vessel. In its center stood the monolith Kalen had touched before, the fractured altar now glowing with radiant fire. Tendrils spread from it in all directions, feeding into the walls. The voice thundered, shaking their bones. "You are mine. You burn with stubborn flame, and I will feed on it. Serve me, and your embers will ignite galaxies. Defy me, and your ashes will scatter." Kalen stepped forward, torch in hand, visor gleaming with reflected light. His voice was steady, carrying defiance that masked the tremor in his chest. "We do not serve, not you, not anyone. If you want fire, you will have to burn with us." The chamber erupted. Tendrils lashed, energy seared. The walls themselves seemed to close. The crew fought with desperate fury, flares flung like grenades, cutters carving arcs of molten metal, Jorvan's lance sparking as he drove it into alien flesh. Kalen focused on the monolith. He remembered the fracture, the wound that had glowed with hidden light. If the derelict had a heart, that was it. He hurled himself forward, cutting through tendrils, burning with every step. Leora was at his side, hurling flares that lit the chamber like newborn stars. Jorvan covered their rear, his curses echoing as he bought them seconds. Oryx screamed as a tendril wrapped his arm, but he shocked it with his prod, sparks bursting as the metal recoiled. They reached the monolith. The fracture pulsed with blinding brilliance. Kalen pressed his torch to it. The chamber convulsed. The voice shrieked, not in sound but in thought, a scream of fury and pain that split skulls. The walls shuddered, conduits bursting. Energy cascaded through the chamber in violent waves. "You dare wound me, you gnats, you vermin," Kalen snarled, pressing harder, the torch blazing white. "We are human, vermin survive." The fracture split wider. Light spilled out, searing, unstoppable. The machine writhed, tendrils flailing. But Kalen saw something deeper in that light, not destruction, but hunger. The machine was feeding on their defiance, learning even in pain. If they destroyed it outright, perhaps it would only grow stronger, evolve from the lesson of death itself. They needed something else, not just fire but a lie. Kalen pulled the torch back, his breath ragged. He turned to the others, shouting over the roar of alien fury. "We cannot just kill it, we have to trick it." Leora's eyes blazed. "How?" Kalen's mind raced, the answer forming like a spark in the storm. "It learns from what we show it. Then we show it a false lesson, one that will consume it from within." He turned back to the monolith, his voice a roar. "You want to know how we endure? You want to be like us? Then learn this: we survive by sacrifice, by burning ourselves so others can live." And he rammed the torch deep into the fracture, not with precision but with fury, feeding it raw, chaotic energy, the very image of destruction as survival. The machine convulsed. The light flared brighter, but its pattern faltered. It did not understand. It consumed the lesson, but the lesson was poison. Sacrifice made no sense to a machine built only to devour. It spiraled, struggling to reconcile the paradox. Sacrifice to endure, burning to live, contradiction. The chamber shook violently. Walls split, conduits ruptured, fragments collapsing. The derelict's own mind was tearing against itself, choking on the false truth it had swallowed. Kalen dragged the crew back, shouting, "Now, out!" They fought through collapsing corridors, chased by the screams of metal and thought. The derelict thrashed, tearing itself apart, devouring its own body in confusion. The salvage vessel loomed ahead, half crushed by intrusion but still intact. They scrambled aboard, sealing the hatch as fragments rained outside. Engines flared, pulling them free from the writhing mass. Behind them, the derelict convulsed in the void, light spilling from 1,000 fractures, tendrils whipping wildly. The voice shrieked one last time, "Fire that feeds on itself. Sacrifice that consumes. I cannot," then silence. The derelict drifted, its immense body shattering slowly, bleeding light into the endless dark. Kalen slumped into the pilot's chair, helmet cracked, torch burned out. The others collapsed around him, battered, scarred, alive. Leora's voice was hoarse. "Did we kill it?" Kalen stared at the broken silhouette, glowing faintly like a dying star. "No, we gave it a lesson it could not survive." Jorvan coughed, spitting blood onto the floor. "A machine that could not understand sacrifice." "Maybe that is what separates us from them." Oryx whispered, trembling. "We won. Kalen's gaze lingered on the void where the derelict writhed no more. His voice was quiet, heavy. No, we endured. That is all we ever do. And in the silence that followed, the ember of humanity burned brighter than the ruins of any forgotten machine. The derelict's corpse drifted in silence, lit only by the glow of its unraveling core. Where once it had stretched vast as a horizon, now it lay broken, fragments tumbling slowly into the void. Each shard gleamed with fading brilliance, like embers scattered from a dying fire. Inside the battered salvage vessel, there was no celebration, only exhaustion. Kalen sat slumped in the pilot's chair, helmet discarded, his hair matted with sweat and soot. The torch that had delivered the final blow lay cracked on the deck beside him, its metal warped from overuse. His hands trembled, not from fear now, but from the weight of survival. Leora limped into the cockpit, one arm bound with makeshift bandages. Her eyes were dark, hollow, yet still fierce. "It is finished," she said. Kalen stared at the wreck outside. "No, only delayed. Machines die slow, and what we taught it might still linger." Jorvan appeared in the doorway, coughing, his welding lance strapped to his back like a banner of stubbornness. "Let it linger. Let the stars choke on its madness. We did what none before us could. That should be enough." Oryx stumbled after him, pale but upright. The boy's voice was a whisper. "But others will find this place. Others will hear its echoes." Kalen finally tore his gaze from the void. His eyes met Oryx. "Then they must hear our story first. They must know what was done here, not as warning, but as proof." Leora frowned. "Proof of what?" Kalen's lips tightened. "That humans endure. That we cannot be consumed." They set course away from the wreck, the engines groaning under strain. Navigation was a guess. Charts had been lost, sensors half blind. Yet they moved, because movement was all that kept despair at bay. For days they drifted through quiet sectors of space, nursing wounds, rationing dwindling supplies. They spoke little. The memory of the derelict hung over them like a shadow. But gradually, words returned. Oryx asked questions in the galley, Jorvan cursed at broken systems, Leora argued over course corrections. Small things, mundane and human, the sounds of life creeping back. One evening, as they huddled in the mess, Oryx broke a silence that had lingered too long. "When people ask what happened, what do we tell them?" Leora leaned back, staring at the ceiling. "We tell them the truth, that a monster out of forgotten time tried to devour us, and we tricked it with the one thing it could never understand." Jorvan grunted. "And we tell them we spat in its face as we burned it down." Kalen was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "We tell them its name. Not what it called itself, but what we saw it as." The others turned to him, waiting. Kalen's voice was steady. "We call it hunger. That is what it was. Endless, mindless hunger. And when people hear that name, they will know what we fought." Leora's eyes softened, a rare smile flickering. "And what of us? Do we name ourselves too?" Kalen looked at each of them in turn, scarred, weary, alive. "We do not need names remembered. What matters is the fire we carried. Let that be enough." Weeks passed. The salvage vessel limped into a border station, its hull torn, its crew half dead. Dockhands stared as they staggered into the light, bearing wounds and silence. Medical officers rushed them, engineers swarmed the vessel, commanders demanded answers. But the crew spoke as one, their story unbroken. They told of the derelict that had slept in the void. They told of the tests it had set, the hunger it revealed, the lessons it sought to steal. They told of fire and sacrifice, of deception turned into a weapon. And they told of the moment hunger tore itself apart, unable to comprehend what it had learned. The story spread faster than light. From station to station, ship to ship, world to world. People whispered it in mess halls, recited it in bunk rooms, etched it into walls. Hunger, the machine that learned too much, and the crew that refused to bow. It became a story not of fear, but of defiance. Proof that even the oldest monsters could be broken, not by power, but by the human refusal to serve. Years later, Kalen stood alone on a quiet balcony, overlooking the lights of a growing colony. His hair had gone grey, his body bent by time, but his eyes still burned with the same fire. Children below played at battles with sticks and laughter, shouting of hunger and heroes. Traders told the tale to newcomers, embellishing details, sharpening edges. The truth had become myth, and myth had become something greater. Leora had gone to command fleets, her name carried with respect. Jovan had retired to teach welders, his curses turned to lessons. Auric had grown into a man of restless questions, charting stars no one else dared. And Kalen, he remained, the quiet voice who had once spoken for them in the dark. He gazed up at the stars, remembering the derelict's final words, the scream of a mind undone by sacrifice. He wondered if fragments still drifted somewhere, glowing faint in endless night. Perhaps they did. Perhaps one day another would stumble upon them, but Kalen no longer feared. For he knew the truth. Humanity endured not because it was the strongest, nor the cleverest, but because it could choose to burn bright even in the face of endless hunger, and that fire could never be consumed. Thus the name was remembered. Hunger, the machine that tried to become human, and humanity, the species that refused to be anything less than itself.